Well, from labor disputes to property rights, 2023 was another eventful year for ag law and tax developments. And as we embark on a new year, it is important to look back on lessons learned from these issues. And the man to do that, Roger McEowen with the Washburn School of Law. Roger joining us. Happy New Year, Roger, to you. Thank you for being here. And from what I understand, this is, I'm looking at the list right now. We got about 4 to cover, but this is in a long list that you have put together. So I feel like this is part 1 in a series. So that being said, let's go ahead and start with the labor disputes and the big court ruling from this past year.
Yeah, you're right, Suzanne. Good to be with you this morning. This is kind of the bottom of my list of what I think are the top, I'd say top 25 developments. I'll eventually get to the top 10. But in 23, the U.S. Supreme Court decided a labor case that makes my list. And it's because of the unique issue involved. And I think it ties into perishable ag products. And very briefly, the case itself had nothing to do with agriculture. It was a cement company where the workers were unionized and they went out on strike, and they struck right after they had filled the cement trucks with cement. And so you've got a perishable product at that point. If that cement does not get delivered and put in place, it's worthless. The workers knew that, the union knew that. They called the strike at that time to ruin the product. And the company sued, and they didn't want to go through the National Labor Relations Board to go through the administrative process. They sued for damages, and the U.S. Supreme Court said 8-1, yeah, that's right. That's not a labor dispute. That's causing economic harm. So I think, Suzanne, the tie to agriculture is when you have, say, fruits and vegetables, and you have unionized workers, and they call a strike maybe after some type of production process has begun, you may be able to go directly to court because that's economic damage.
Another big 2023 development involved the application of the Swampbuster rules on a South Dakota farm. Talk about that one.
Yeah, this is an important case. The farm owner's father back in the 1930s had planted a tree belt, a shelter belt, to keep the snow off of roads and off of fields. Well, it did such a great job as the trees developed and matured over the years that it would pile up the snow as it was designed to do so, and then it would melt in the spring. And in some springs, there would be enough water that would pond a little bit in an area less than an acre. Well, USDA came in and said, that's a wetland. You can't farm it and collect government subsidies, because if you did that, you'd be violating Swampbuster. The producer came up, he challenged that determination. He wanted a redetermination based on additional evidence that he provided, and the government said no, even though the statute at issue indicates that he is entitled to a redetermination. The U.S. Supreme Court, he's lost on this one. The U.S. Supreme Court has been asked to take the case.
I do remember discussing these abandoned rail lines that are converted to recreational trails. I know that's been a lot of controversy surrounding that. Were there any developments on that front this past year?
Yeah, there was a U.S. Court of Appeals case out of the Federal Circuit in 23. It's a big opinion because basically what it said was that the farm owners, the landowners along that line, if all the railroad received in its initial grant was an easement, then you look to state law and the terms of the grant to determine what happens once the rail line is discontinued for railroad purposes. And here they said that the grant was specific for railroad purposes, and to let a trail use it was beyond the scope of the easement. And since then, that rail line did not revert back to the adjacent landowners. That was an unconstitutional taking, and those landowners were entitled to compensation.
Wow, that was a good point. Last case I want to get to. Focus on charitable remainder annuity trust abuse. Talk about the highlights here.
Yeah, charitable remainder annuity trust can be a real good tool for farmers and ranchers, particularly if they're retiring and they move into that last crop and they've already deferred the income from last year's crop to this year, and now they have this year's crop. And so they want to avoid a pileup of income and self-employment tax. A good way to do that is with a charitable remainder annuity trust. Well, if it's done right and you get good tax advice. Unfortunately, there were a group of various professionals, and I use that term loosely, that were running a fraudy trust operation. And it snagged a bunch of farmers. There was an ad that was placed by this group in the High Plains Journal. Of course, a lot of farmers see that. End result was the bad tax advice ended up costing the government, costing about 70 farmers additional tax and penalties of about $14 million. And the Department of Justice has put this group out of commission.
Wow, the good thing they have. Boy, know who you are dealing with. And what stands out,
Right.
Good tax advice. Roger, as always, thank you so much. Happy New Year. Look forward to talking to you a lot more about these cases. Roger McEowen with the Washburn School of Law.